here to talk about his first multifamily investment that has finally gone full cycle. Everybody give it up for Joseph.
All right. How's everybody doing? Story time. All right. So, how you doing? I am Joseph Bramante, CEO of Track Real Estate Partners. And this evening, we're going to take a quick trip back in time, talk about my first deal, which I actually just recently sold back in June. So, circa 2020, I was here. This is me, 25 at the time, I believe. In Papua New Guinea, I was working for Exxon. We were building an LNG facility out in the middle of the jungle. This is what it looked like when we touched down, when we first got started, true greenfield project. And our job was to go in and basically do all the infrastructure, build the roads, because ultimately we were building this 2-train LNG facility, which was going to be taking natural gas up from the mountain in Hides, where it got compressed and then piped down to the shore, and then barged or then liquefied and put onto boats and sent over to Japan, which had already been all sold before the project ever started. So it's an interesting project. We did the early works, as I mentioned, and the logistics. So we built and designed and managed that. The construction of this airline runway for the Hercules aircraft, largest in the world for carrying really, really heavy loads. And back then, this was my understanding of workforce housing. So we were literally building man camps, and my house was actually right there. So I lived in this little apartment there. And 24/7 was on the job, see the same people every day, all day, work, sleep, cafeteria. And so it was an interesting life, had a whole lot of free time. And at that time, I was resident full-time. My manager was a rotator, so that meant that he would go home for 4 weeks and come back for 4 weeks. And every time he came back, he had a new rental house. This is 2010. The market had just crashed. And so I got interested. I was curious what he was doing, and we started talking. And the internet was really slow in Papua New Guinea, so had to download some books and read some books on it. So I did a little bit of a book-a-thon in 2011. The first book there, the red one, Investing in Real Estate, basically just says that single family is great, but if you have the money, go multifamily. And at that time, I was doing pretty well overseas, so I decided I'm going to go multifamily. The second book there, Mastering Real Estate, was good. Talked about some of the multifamily concepts, formulas, and strategies. And really got more interested in the multifamily side. The third book was so-so. It was kind of that's a repeat of the first two. But the fourth one there, Multifamily Millions, that was my personal favorite, still is today, by David Lindahl. Multifamily Millions is a book really written almost like an engineering book, which I was familiar with, where you would just a listing of formulas and case studies and how all this stuff applies. So I just really fell in love with the formulas and the math of multifamily. In the last book there, Emerging Markets, was a book talking about going into markets where you're building the first property or second property and all the tremendous upside there is in that. And for those of you who follow us know the kind of stuff that we're in. So this was me. In case you don't know where Papua New Guinea is, it is literally on the other side of the world. Here's Houston, and I was on this little island over here, and legit, these are my neighbors. I took this photo outside the Land Cruiser. This was very customary to see in the grocery store, wherever. That was life for me. It was a really cool experience. Don't want to go back and do it again, but I'm glad I got to experience that. So I'm over here on the other side of the world. Another interesting thing about that is the time zones. So we're 13 hours ahead. So that means I could do a full day's work, and I can clock out at 6 p.m. and it's 8 a.m. in Houston. So I can do another 4 hours and work till midnight, 1 a.m. and do the first half day in Houston time. So I discovered LoopNet at that time, and I'm on LoopNet. I'm calling all these brokers from across the world and basically working 2 jobs in the same day. Finally ended up finding a property after about 6 months of hunting and discovered this beautiful property. It was a 26-unit property built in 1964. It had a fire remodel on it, average square foot about 742 square feet. Purchased it in October 17th, 2011 for $25,000 per door, $650,000. It was just me and one other partner. I'd convinced one of my coworkers to go in with me. I don't know why he believed me, but we got it done. But the property was really well located at I-10 and Silver, right next to the IKEA, if you know where that is, and the
Exactly where the property, my friend lived in that same street.
Yeah, it's a
And
great.
I remember passing all the time thinking, somebody's gonna buy this piece of property and make it nice.
It was a great property. Over by the marquee, there was actually a Chick-fil-A right next there as well, and I used to go there during the renovation. Anyway, also a Walmart. But these are my financials. So the market was still maturing back then. Multifamily isn't what it is today. And to get handwritten financials was not that uncommon. So to have literally a box of receipts, and here you go, you figure out the numbers, and somebody is just signing and certifying, saying, yep, that's my financials. I don't know if people would buy deals these days if that's how they got their financials. Here is my rent roll, also handwritten. And can you imagine it's only 26 units? Imagine if that was 100, 200, 300 units. That would have been not fun. So let's go on and do the closing here. So had a pretty easy closing for my first time, not because I did anything well, I actually just didn't really do one. I decided the books didn't really talk about closing in detail. So a couple of things I did wrong during the closing, didn't do a site tour. I had a friend, I asked her to go and drive the property, so she drove around, took some pictures, gave us a thumbs up, and that was the site tour. I actually never stepped foot on the property until 3 months after we owned it. We had a crazy broker, that's another story. We didn't get rehab quotes, we didn't do a market survey, we didn't do an environmental, we didn't get insurance bids, didn't scope the sewer lines, and we did not hire an experienced property manager. A couple things we did do right, location. I think the one thing everybody in this room knows about real estate. So we got a great location and the new roof, although that was kind of a gimme because the seller told us it needed new roofs. So we kind of knew that going in. We were difficult out-of-country buyers. We had to mail in certified documents. When you had to go to the U.S. Embassy when you're traveling, you got loan docs, you got to get things notarized. And the only way you can get things notarized when you're overseas is an embassy. So for those of you who like to travel, don't worry, you can travel and close deals. I did it on my very first one and didn't know what I was doing. So let's talk about the takeover. So this is a picture of me managing the deal, the takeover from overseas. Still have that tie. We took over the tenants. We had about 15%, about four tenants left the property. Whenever you buy a property, you have to give notice that basically there's a new sheriff in town, and pretty often some residents decide that they don't like the new sheriff, so they go and they get scared and they leave. So we had about 4 people move out. We had some eviction issues, or just people just weren't paying, so we had to evict some people. Didn't really have a good property management system in place. We didn't have one. The leasing files were a huge mess because they were all still paper. We had a lot of residents that were on month to month, which is, it's a good thing and a bad thing. It's a good thing when you're trying to do renovations because you can just kind of give notice whenever you want, and it helps with pushing rents. It's a bad thing, from a risk perspective because theoretically everybody can move out at the end of the month and you can't do anything about it. No monthly P&L statements, and we weren't getting weekly reports because we didn't know to ask for them. We kind of suspected that you should have monthly reports and weekly reports because that's what we had at Exxon. But our manager didn't give them because he was not experienced. So let's go over the plan. The plan was to leverage our property manager to competitively bid out and manage the bids. He had a high-end single-family renovation company, so we felt he was somewhat competent in renovations. A little bit of a conflict, but we ended up self-sourced a lot of the bids and the subcontractors in order to find the bids we wanted, and the idea was just to have him GC and manage those subs. But it turns out he was a bad property manager and even worse GC. So just things just were not going well for us. We end up hiring unknowingly expensive subs, which is very easy to do in Houston. Majority of the subs you're going to come across, subcontractors, are going to be single family, and the prices are going to be all over the board. Multifamily subs are a very niche market. Pricing is very different than multifamily, than single family. And so if you don't know what you're doing, you don't know to ask the right people, you can end up paying a whole lot more for your renovation than you should. So that's why it's very important to have a very experienced management company who has those contacts, or a GC who specializes in multifamily. We didn't have a defined scope, and our costs quickly grew out of control. It's project management 101. We should have known better, obviously, with the Exxon background. And there was no owner present at the job site because I was still overseas. My business partner was also rotating overseas, and he would rotate back to Ohio because that's where he was based out of instead of Houston. So it was really nobody there on the property. So you might be wondering, how can somebody with this project management experience end up in this situation? He's got a property. Obviously, things are not looking good. How can this be? Well, at that time, I was 10 foot tall and bulletproof. You kind of go through life. You've been achieving a lot of things. You always winning. And you end up getting yourself into situations. And at that time, it was a small little property. It was a very small piece of my income. I was making too much money overseas. And I tell you, you kind of get through these things. So we got in this situation, and we just, at that time, we're going to these deals, and we think we can do anything, right? So you're getting in, and whatever comes your way, you feel like you can handle it. Well, we start running into problems. So our first problem we ran into, 4 months into ownership, we got a notice saying that insurance you thought you bought, yeah, you didn't really buy insurance. You don't have insurance on your property. The broker that we bought it from got scammed. And so we were at first a little distressed, but then after talking to our attorney, he told us, don't worry about it, we'll give them a notice and just say, yeah, that sucks, but by the way, you're liable if anything happens. So we sort of had coverage through the brokerage, but we didn't really want to test it. Anyway, we continued on, and now we're renovating the units by ourselves. Nobody's really taught us what to do. We're just kind of doing these renovations, paying cash for these renovations, and I think we did not too bad. This was the unit on the left, the before, and then the after photo there. Came in, we put carpet throughout, two-tone paint job. We kept the fixtures and the vents as is. Carpet throughout was cheaper, so we were just kind of going for the cheapest price. We had closed up some of the openings here because we were going to be adding cabinets and gutting out the cabinets that were already there. So you can see where that circle is, where we'd filled in the wall, we blew out the cabinets. These were solid wood cabinets that had about, a couple thousand layers of paint on them. And so we stripped all of that out and came back with prefab cabinets, Formica counters, and it just looked good, much better than it was. Added a vent hood, added cabinets up front. There was a real shortage of cabinets. I don't know if people just didn't use a lot of pots back then and stuff, but there was not a whole lot of cabinets in that unit, so we added a lot more storage space for them. The bathroom, we went and we blew out the bathroom because it had separated the toilet from the vanity area, and it just made it feel really small. So by blowing out the wall, blowing out all of the existing cabinets and come back with, again, prefab cabinets, opened up that area to make much, much bigger. Ripped through the tubs as well, came back with brand new tub tile surround. Notice as you're looking at the photos, what's between the studs. I mean, it's just the brick, that's it. There's not a whole lot of insulation. Anyway, interesting. Roofs, that was our 30-year-old tar and gravel roof that we went in, and we replaced that whole thing with a brand new TPO roof, which is the Cadillac of roofs. I probably wouldn't have bought that roof if I knew better, but we got it and it worked really well. It was just expensive and a lot more than what we needed. The AC, this was a fun one. So we had never seen this. This is some redneck engineering 101. What you're looking at here is a window unit that's blowing into a fur down, which seems genius, I know. Seems genius. Seems like a good idea. The problem is you have really cold, really slow-moving air going through that conduit, and all kinds of nasty things start growing. So doesn't really work very well for you. So we had to go in and we stripped all that out, came in with added central AC. But part of adding central AC involves electricians. They've got to pull permits, and part of the permit process is you've got to have an environmental. Normally you would have these things when you close. We didn't, so we figured no big deal. Let's go ahead and order our environmental. And that's when we encountered our second little tiny issue here. Our manager gave us the report and notified us that unfortunately the property had asbestos on it, and we would have to be doing an asbestos abatement. And my words were, I think what anybody's words would be, was shit, we need to stop work. And after some crying in the corner, we came up with a plan. So we got some quotes, and as you can see, and this was priced, this is 2012 prices, so I can imagine what it is today. That was a lot of money back then. $2,500 to abate a one-bedroom, $3,400 for a two-bedroom, average $3,300, and that's just the abatement. That doesn't include the cost to put it back together. That's ripping the sheetrock off the wall. You've got to put the sheetrock back on the wall. So $85,000, and I was a little pissed off, not really happy, but we figured, we'll figure it out. We'll make it work, and still wasn't that phased. Then the final nail came. The final bullet came that kind of really, really hurt. A month later, Wednesday, actually almost about 12 years ago to the day, had a meeting at 5:30 in the afternoon with my manager, and they let me know that I was no longer required to come into the office. And so that's when I got let go from Exxon, and that was a pretty big blow. And just pro tip: don't take meetings at 5:30 in the afternoon. So we had the perfect storm here: insurance fraud in February, asbestos in June, and then fired in July. So 2012 was my, what was that Mayan year? They thought that for me, it happened. It really happened. So just a quick recap of everything that went down. So we spent about $171,000 on the renovation. From a cash breakdown, we're all in this deal for about $411,000. Down payment was $227, plus rehab and some self-funding was about $184. Again, we bought it for $650. So we're all in now. To break even, we'd have to sell it for, $834. And don't forget, we've still got asbestos abatement. So anyway, that was my career. That was my first deal. Thanks for coming out. Questions? Just kidding. So that was a Wednesday. And coincidentally, I had already signed up for a case study just like this one tonight, which was on the Thursday. So the very next day, I was at a case study in the audience, just like you are, except I was in major debt, no job, and about to lose my property, and decided to go ahead and join because I really had no choice. I was like, please teach me, because obviously I didn't know what I was doing. And so you would think that somebody in my position would have joined a group like this and immediately listened to everything that they told you and just absorbed everything like a sponge. But you would be wrong, because I did not listen to what they told me to do. Everybody from the mentors, all the mentors of the club, everybody from the CEO, from Steve's role all the way down, said, sell the property, take a loss, this will be your learning. The problem with that was, one, I don't like losing money. Two, half of that was mine, and that was all the money I'd made overseas. Somebody earlier was talking about keeping cash on hand. Yeah, that wasn't me. I was all in for everything I did. I was trying to grow as fast as I could, so I went all in on that deal. I was 6 units down that I couldn't touch that had asbestos on them, so we're 77% occupied, not likely to sell very favorably. And the upside was we knew we had a great location, and by this time we had done a market survey, and the market survey showed very strong rents, and we were surrounded by a lot of Class A. So there was this kind of really small, faint glimmer of hope, of light at the end of the tunnel, that we may be able to spend our way out of this thing and do some sort of renovation. But again, this is my first deal, so what do I know about doing this kind of thing? But luckily, I met my partner, Carrie, back there. Carrie, stand up, please. So she was one of the two people in that organization that said, you know what, you can do this. And so we had partnered, and so I listened to her, and we ended up, I went all in, I cashed out the last money I had. So I had my 401k, took the tax hit, cashed the whole thing out, used that because I had no more money coming in, so I had to figure out how to get the additional down payment for a new loan somewhere. We hired an experienced property manager, aka Carrie. We came up with a defined scope, imagine that, which included those 8 partial units that we'd already started. We optimized the asbestos abatement for a 50% savings. We competitively bid out the rehab scope. We engaged a broker to get us a new loan and new insurance policy. And then we end up managing the scope and cost growth through the change order process. All that project manager stuff that you learn. And now this time, the owner was present and visited the job site frequently because the owner was unemployed. So, step 1, lease down the property. So we were about to, the first part of the process was we're going to do an abatement, and we really didn't want to have people walking around when they see signs like this all over the place, because when that happens, people all of a sudden start having coughs and chest pain, and we just didn't want to deal with it. So we vacated the whole property. Then we started the asbestos abatement. And the way we brought the cost down was we only abated only half of it roughly. We abated all the wet areas. So the kitchens, the bathrooms, the AC rooms, anywhere where there was plumbing and we might need to get behind those walls at some point in the future, we abated. The rest of it, we left it alone. The living rooms, don't put a hole in that wall, it'll kill you. So we just left it as is. This is what an abatement looks like. Hopefully you never have to go through one, but there's going to be a guy who's got the full, COVID suit on, and we had there's this little cleaning room right there, and then to the right there's this little vacuum pump, and so it's sucking the air the whole time that he's cleaning, and they're sampling the air to make sure that there's not X percentage of friable asbestos floating around. Then we did a cable retrofit, so we got Comcast to come in and put cable in the units, which was part of one of our revenue streams to cable and internet. Then we picked colors. My mom's an artist, love her, but her idea was to put all these crazy splotches on the wall and figure out which one better matches the brick. And I'll tell you, every time we've done a couple of dozen properties with choosing paint, and I'll tell you, nobody ever agrees on what color to paint the property. So just get out of the decision. I don't even care anymore. So I just let them do whatever they do. Installing the gates. So we installed vehicle and pedestrian gates on the property. And because we had abated, we got to see a lot of stuff that we probably didn't want to see. So we saw a bunch of termite damage. So we had to go in and obviously fix that. So fixed up some of the, this was termite and wood rot in the bathrooms, which was pretty common. Also, again, look at that. Maybe we should have just not put the sheetrock back and left that. I think could have charged more for that nice brick. Installing AC. So here we're putting the vertical AC. This was the 2-bedroom, I believe. We had installed a false ceiling for the conduits to go between the units. Had a little bit of a bee problem. This was one of the first units that we renovated, so we ended up sitting vacant for a little while. And so bees came in, and you can see in the top corner there where the hive was. This was the hive over here. They scraped it off, and we had to forcefully evict them from our unit. New plumbing. So we installed new plumbing for the washer and dryers. The thing with plumbing is anytime you touch that system, you got to bring it up to code. So you want to touch it as little as possible because it gets expensive. Replacing the old sewer line. This is a 1964 sewer line. You can see holes in it, and where it's not even touching. So when it was covered with dirt, it was just like a clay pipe around it that was keeping the shit all down going. So just kept that shit together. So landscaping. So we had, on the left side there is what it was before. On the oak trees, it killed everything. And we'd installed brand new landscaping. It's all dead now because oak trees killed it again. But that's what it looked like after we installed it. Fun fact, that fountain was donated to me by one of our investors, who's still an investor today, and I personally installed it. So that was one of the two things I did, and if we have time at the end, I'll tell you the other physical work I did on the property, which is a funny story. And this is what we ended up with on the 2-bedroom. So the before and after, you can see there's no more carpet in the living room. So we went with hard surface throughout, hard surface counters, flooring, to keep the turn costs really low going forward. Back then, the style was dark floors and dark cabinets. I know it's not anymore, but this is 2013. So, but we did keep carpet in the bedrooms because people do like to have carpet in their bedroom. And the bathrooms, again, matching prefab cabinets, granite counters. Removed the mirror fully this time and just came with a framed mirror, but kept the same tub tile surround. And then here's the kitchens, and this is the 2-bedroom, so we put the stackable washer and dryer in that kitchen. And we decided to keep the gas because 1, the appliances are cheaper in gas, and 2, residents really like cooking with gas. I know I do. And so this was our releasing schedule. So we started releasing in November of 2013. So remember, I bought it in October of 2011, and so it was roughly 2 years later, 2 years of hell, before we're actually releasing the property back up. And really, it was probably that first year of just kind of messing around before I actually did anything. So it was like the summer of 2012 when we started all over. And we closed on that loan roughly in January of 2013 or December of 2013. And I just remember for 9 months, we're just sitting there just burning money, renovating this property and just fingers crossed, hoping this thing works, because had no idea if it was going to work at the time. We were just kind of flying by instruments. But anyway, we started leasing in November, and I tell you what, when we hit March, we were NOI positive for the first time in March, and we only had 5 leases, and we were 42% occupied, we were NOI positive. I was like, wow, this is a good day. They got a little greedy, naturally, decided to push the rents, and then it stalled. So then we lowered the rents back down, and then we leased up fully that summer. And then we went and we did the refi. So this is our numbers, so kind of pre and post, so pre-education and post-education, however you want to look at it. We spent about $131,000 initially, then $642,000 once we kind of had a plan and knew what we were doing. All in for $772, about $30,000 a door. Again, we bought it for $25,000. Don't recommend anybody do a rehab that big or out of the gate. And this was our rent roll, our rent schedule. So 2011, the rents were averaging $510, and once fully renovated, the rents were averaging $1,068. Except this time, the rents also have an additional other charges, which they didn't have before. So now we're charging for parking. There's 24 parking spots and 26 units. You do the math. We were charging for $15. We had storage units, we had pet fees, we were charging for water and sewer, and now that cable that you saw us installing, that was bringing an extra $65 a month. So all in, it's about $132 per unit average with other income. So brought our average rents, if you look at it that way, to roughly $1,200, which was an increase of about $700 over the previous. NOI, which is really what we're all here about, started off about $54,000, and in 2015, it was over $200,000. Just note that the vacancy is 23% in 2015. So once you look at the stabilized vacancy of 2015, add about $60,000 or so to that NOI there, you're at over $200,000. So we quadrupled the NOI from when we started. And so in 2015, we could have sold it, but instead we decided just to go ahead and refinance it. We got multiple BOVs for $2.5 to $3 million, and we decided let's just go ahead and refi. We're all in the deal for $488,000. Our bridge loan was $1 million. We got a Freddie refi loan for $2.2 million, so our net profit was about $1.2 million on the refi, tax-free, 245% return. That was 2015. That was a good year. And then for the next 10 years or so, 9 years, we took all that money and we redeployed it in 4 other deals. We launched TriArc. We spent the rest of the years just kind of casually working on new development because I didn't really want to sell my baby. I did the cardinal sin. Don't get emotionally attached to your properties. Sue me, I did. And so we were looking at, I've always wanted to build a high-rise. And so we were looking at building a high-rise on this property. We talked to Kirksey in 2020. And we had a few SketchUps. This was one of them. It was a 20-story high-rise that had a pool and amenity deck and podium construction. We were going to have to work with our neighboring properties to go ahead and JV together to obviously contribute all their land to have something that we could build together. It was about 2.4 acres. And we were in talks with the neighbors, but they weren't really too excited about partnering with us because we didn't really have any high-rise experience, obviously. So we needed somebody who did have high-rise experience. And fortunately, my partner, Carrie, used to work for this company, Lind, and she was basically the right-hand woman for David Lind, and they've got a name for building high-rises. And one of their high-rises was High-Rise of the Year in Chicago, and their brand was the Envy. And so we went and visited them in San Antonio, had a presentation prepared, and we had already kind of pre-drafted and just called this the Envy Houston, because their high-rise in Chicago is called the Envy Chicago. So I was trying to, a little subliminal messaging there. And the cover photo here is actually the view from the property. I took my drone up 20 stories, which would have been the penthouse of this high-rise, and that would have been the view from downtown if we would have put a high-rise there. So unfortunately, that didn't happen because of COVID and all the other nasty stuff. So we decided let's look at something else. So we didn't look at doing self-storage. And we talked to the big major operators there, the Public Storage and others, but they had other properties within a 1-mile radius and they didn't want to compete against each other. So they didn't want to manage our deal. So, and we didn't really know any others that did it, and we didn't want to risk doing it ourselves because it would have been a pretty small public storage or self-storage site. So then in 2023, we then started looking at doing build-to-rent on the site. And we got pretty far down the development process and design process for build-to-rent. But unfortunately, the land basis was too expensive. We would have had to sell the property for a loss in order to make the build-to-rent development a win. And I didn't really want to sell my property for a loss. So instead, we kind of salvaged the design that we came up with on that Shavelson, and we just found the cheaper site in Garden Oaks, which actually breaks ground this October. And then in 2024, we were approached by a group called Lifehouse. So they provide housing, help, and hope for pregnant, sex-trafficked women and their children. And when they approached us originally, we said, sorry guys, not for sale. And we directed them to there's a neighboring property to us that we knew was for sale because we tried buying him at one time, but he had a crazy price. But we knew he had a good heart, we thought. So we figured, maybe he'll sell to this charity. He ended up being a jerk and was very difficult to work with, and so they couldn't get a deal with him. So then they came back, and strangely enough, I had just started attending this church. And it turns out their board member also was attending that church. And I'd only been there for 2 weeks, and I was just remember thinking, what are the odds that I'm going to be attending this church in this giant city, and we're in the same, they're all here, and I just, just kind of felt calling on my heart. So I don't know, I felt God was telling me to do it, and it just felt right. And everything that we had done to that point, it just wasn't kind of panning out, and the build-to-rent had just kind of flopped. And so we're like, you know what, maybe this is really what the property is meant for. So we cut a deal, ended up selling the property to them. And it worked out. We sold it for $3.5 million, a little bit more than our valuations were 10 years ago. And so netted out another $1.1 million at the sale. Total net profits on that deal, $2.3 million, 4.56 multiple, 32% IRR over a 12-year period. So not too bad for the first deal. Now I'll take the next couple of slides. Just got to tell you a little bit about us and who we are as Triarch. So we are a fully integrated multifamily investment company. So we have not only product management, but asset management, construction, and then acquisitions and development all in-house. We believe firmly in a sturdy, four-legged stool for multifamily because we want to be able to be active and participate in everything throughout the cycle. Because as you know, in cycles, there's a time to buy, there's a time to build, there's a time to sell. And by having all those skills, you can participate and be active in all of those phases of the cycle. And what we've learned over time is that it takes three things to create a winning multifamily investment strategy. And that's a people-first culture for employees and residents, and committed financial stewardship for the investors, and again, that fully integrated approach that combines the investment, construction, operations, and development all in one. This trifecta of Triarch is what allows us to deliver above-market returns to our investors. And our leadership team, so obviously myself, been doing this since 2011. We've done a couple deals. My partner Carrie in the background, 35 years in the industry, award-winning project management executive, regional vice president for GFI and a couple other companies, managed portfolios of up to 10,000 at a time. Then my other co-founder, Deborah, who couldn't be here today, she runs our operations. 33 years in the industry, property management, managed portfolios about 5,000. Hers is more on the Class A lease-up, new construction side. I would say Carrie's kind of B and C side. And then Robert Mitchell runs our construction company. That's all the renovations. We keep all that in-house, as well as you do it for third party and for others. Cool thing about him, he started off in property management. So you got a GC who understands the challenges of property management that we face. And then Jared Spain runs our acquisitions, 15 years of multifamily experience, 5,000 units transacted. He was the former VP of acquisitions over at S2 Capital. And then our most recent hire, Jake Rowland, he's 2 weeks on the job. He's our VP of Capital Markets, 13 years of multifamily experience. He was the former Senior Director of Finance for Greystar, where he secured over $2 billion of debt and equity. About $400 million of that equity was JV from institutions like BlackRock, Carlyle, and others. So at Triarch, kind of our whole bigger picture vision was always to kind of go more institutional route while being able to marry our retail, our high net worth investors with that. So we blend our institutions with our high net worth investors for Really great returns. So we've done about 4 exits, 23.5 IRR, 23.2 IRR, 2.5 equity multiple, and most importantly in this market, we have never lost capital, which is an easy thing to say right in the beginning. It's like when you start in school, everybody's got a 4.0. But once you've been doing it for a little while, and 13 plus years, it becomes more and more important to always maintain and never having lost capital. And then, of course, at the bottom is the deals we have going on. What's not shown, we've got about 700 units in development between 4 different developments going on, all breaking ground in the next 6 to 9 months. So anyway, that's us, that's Triarch, that's my story on my first deal. Any questions? I know, it's breathtaking, it's a great story. Take your time. Oh, I'll tell you, now that we have some time, the other piece of physical work I did, and there's the third story that I'm sure Carrie would love to tell you about landscaping and me cutting grass, but I'll leave that one alone. So you can see that there are poles on the first floor. Let's go to the first photo. There's a lot of slides. There we go. So like the bottom right photo. So there's a lot of there's a lot of poles. There's poles on the first floor, and we got 5 minutes. Cool. First floor and top floor. And when we got our initial bids to do the painting, the scope said that they were going to scrape the poles, and I didn't know what scraping meant. So I had the GCs like, hey, what does scraping mean? And so he showed me, and they literally just take a flat bar and they scrape the paint. Whatever paint comes off, and whatever doesn't, and they paint it. And so you've got it's still rough. It doesn't look nice. And I said, no, that's not good enough. In my background, when I was in my younger days in college, I used to work for this company called Perfilog, and I spent the whole summer wire brushing oil and gas pipe. So I knew what was possible because I used to physically knock the paint off myself. So I said, no, I'll take care of that. So I spent the whole weekend and I wire brushed every pole on the first floor. And then on Sunday I said, fuck that. And I didn't do it. So if you walk the property, the first floor is beautiful and smooth and perfect. The second floor is not. It's not that way at all. And then since Carrie's here, so this is our yard. It's obviously, there's not a lot of grass here. You can see that. And the landscaping bid that we got to cut the grass was a lot more than I remember charging my neighbors when I was a kid cutting grass. And I was like, wow, this is a lot of money. No way, this is a little bit of grass. I'll cut this. And I don't know why, but for some reason I bought one of those, like the ones that you push that have the wheels, like the old school ones. Don't ask. I don't know what was going on. But I did 2 strips, one strip, and I said, no, call the landscaper, let's go. So I don't know what I was thinking. But anyway, yeah, the landscapers charge a lot of money. So all right, now questions. Yes? Yeah. Yeah, no more. My last day at Exxon was it was July 18th, 5:30 p.m. 2012. Yeah. Well, my parents got that notice too. I told them I quit. Everybody does, by the way. For the first 2 years, they thought I quit. So too embarrassed to tell them I actually got fired. But I remember my mom was like, well, just go tell them you're sorry and you want your job back. And I was like, no, I don't think I can, Mom. Yes?
How did you float 2 years this property with no job and all?
So I ended up, I only didn't work for 6 months. So from 6 months after getting let go, and once we got the project up and going, I ended up getting a job in January. So after we closed on the loan and we started, I got a job in January close by to the property, working oil and gas sales, which was a nice cushy job. They paid me a lot more than I should have, and didn't sell shit the whole time I was there. But and I worked probably half the time on this and the other half the time on their job, and ended up getting let go. So I've been fired, and then they no, it wasn't for what you would think. They actually got bought. So they got bought, and I was part of a wave of layoffs. And I was like, wow, this is cool. So I've been fired, I've been laid off, and then I worked one more time in 2014. I worked for 2 months for a private jet company. I was a broker because, right, private jets, rich people, I need to raise money. It seems pretty, I didn't raise $1, and it was the least amount of money I've ever made in my life. And I was like, this sucks. So I quit that job. So, and that was right. I quit that one because my refi was coming up. So I was good. So that's how. Next. Actually, and I also, I got my bartending license at some point. So that was my plan B. I didn't know. My plan B was to get my bartending license and go pimp liquor. Because my mom was a bartender and I knew it worked, and it was I can work a weekend and make a couple $100. But I was living very cheap. I had a roommate. I was living, my rent was like $300 a month. I was being super cheap. All right. Well, cool. Thanks, guys.